Hey historians, welcome to the gym. I'm just warming up for our lesson today, the Boxer Rebellion, and as you can see, I'm pretty amped about it. What? What do you mean the Boxer Rebellion wasn't about boxers? It's in the name, the Boxer Rebellion. Well, okay. I guess I better go change my shirt. Let's roll the intro. From previous lessons, you'll remember that Asia had been pretty isolationist for quite some time. They had some bad experiences with outsiders and quite understandably wanted to limit that influence. But change came in the form of Commodore Perry, his gunboats, the Opium Wars, and all kinds of other unpleasantness. You kinda get what Asian people were saying about outsiders, right? As we learned in our previous lesson, the US open door policy was meant to curb nations from carving up China like they'd done with Africa. But when you mix gigantic foreign powers with wealthy private companies and a healthy dose of corruption, well, China ended up on the losing end. So to try and figure out where China goes, let's answer these questions. What actions led to the Boxer Rebellion? What happened during the Boxer Rebellion? And what was the aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion? And something to keep in mind as we look at this uprising, how do imperialism and colonialism foster resentment among those who were colonized? As you'll recall from our previous lesson, the ruling Qing dynasty of China had suffered military defeats, foreign domination at home, and millions of Chinese addicted to opium through the influence of those foreign powers. The leader of the Qing, 18-year-old Emperor Guangxu, looked around him and realized he wasn't ruling much of China at all. 1894 had seen defeat at the hands of the Japanese in the First Sino-Japanese War, with the loss of Korea, Taiwan, and other islands to Japan, along with Manchuria. This prompted the triple intervention by Russia, Germany, and France, which led to Japan backing off, but left a fortified European presence in China. In 1897, the murder of 2 German missionaries in Juye, a coastal county in Shandong province in northeast China, prompted Germany to blockade and eventually occupy the port. On top of all the foreign intervention, the Yellow River Valley experienced a cycle of unexpected floods and droughts beginning in 1898. Starvation began to spread. Figuring that he couldn't do very much about the foreign influence until his own country was in order, the emperor enacted the 100 Days Reform in 1898. Guangxu took aim squarely at the bloated bureaucracy of his own Qing administration and proposed to modernize the education system to focus on math and science, change to a constitutional monarchy, use capitalism to rapidly modernize Chinese industry and the military, and establish trade schools and departments to oversee foreign trade. These were incredibly popular with the common Chinese people, who'd suffered from foreign wars and domestic oppression. They weren't so popular with the administrators of the Qing dynasty, who had also gotten their positions by doing exactly the opposite of these things. So, what to do? Remember Empress Cixi and her isolationist reforms from our last lesson? Well, how do you think she came to power? If you guessed there was a palace coup against her stepson that put her in charge, that was both an incredibly specific and really good guess. Empress Cixi assumed control and promptly reversed the 100 Days Reform in favor of her own version of anti-Western policies, which we learned about in our previous lesson. Whenever wide-ranging reforms, palace coups, and the reversal of good things for common people all happen in short order, the rumors start flying. Some, rightly, suspected the Qing administration was responsible for the overthrow. However, most of the common people decided that foreign influence was the root of all the issues in China, and so began the Boxer Rebellion. So, what actions led to the Boxer Rebellion? The events surrounding the 100 Days Reforms weren't the whole story, just the spark that lit the rebellion. I mentioned the oppressed Chinese earlier, but not only were Chinese treated like second-class peasants by their own rulers, but foreigners and those who had adopted the Christian faith from colonizers were given special privileges, such as unrestricted travel. The Boxers, joined by several thousand others, first began attacking Qing administrators in the north, but soon turned their attention to the real threat, foreigners. You remember all that territory that now belonged to Russia, Germany, and Japan? Let's stop right here and clear up my own confusion from the beginning of the lesson, shall we? The Society of the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, a peasant athletic club formed in Beijing and credited with launching the Boxer Rebellion, never actually boxed as we'd think of it. They did practice Chinese martial arts, which they believed empowered them and made them invincible to bullets. Europeans lumped any and all Chinese athletics into the generic term Chinese boxing. So, when these clubs rebelled, and some of them happened to practice Chinese boxing as well, boom! The Boxer Rebellion. So, moving from Shandong and through the North China Plain, thousands of Boxers attacked and burned foreign establishments, killing missionaries and Chinese who had converted to Christianity as they marched toward Beijing. As the throng headed to the capital, hundreds of foreign nationals took refuge in the legation quarter, or the area set aside for foreign diplomats. United under the cry of "Death to the foreign devils!" the thousand-strong mob arrived and laid siege to the quarter, trapping all inside and calling for them to be thrown out of the country or killed. The Empress Sichi, happy that the focus was no longer on her or her government, publicly called for the support of the Boxers and decreed that all parts of China were to resist and throw out the foreigners. While the Empress stated her support, she did not commit any troops to support the besieging Boxers. In the meantime, the foreigners and Christians trapped in the legation quarter sent for help, and they got it. 8 nations sponsoring 19,000 troops, and completely without any official request, permission, or even a heads up to the Qing, marched on Beijing, defeated the Boxers, and lifted the siege. So, what happened during the Boxer Rebellion? The immediate aftermath included 30,000 Chinese Christians killed and thousands of Europeans trapped in the city, the Empress pushing to throw out the foreigners, which then led to 8 nations invading with thousands of uninvited troops. The 8 nations condemned the actions of the Boxers and remained in control of Beijing and the surrounding areas, while Russia moved into Manchuria in a full-scale occupation. Thousands of Boxers, alleged Boxers, supporters of Boxers, and officials who were thought to have supported the Boxers were tortured and killed by the occupying force, while the surrounding area was pillaged by the armies. The negotiated peace between the 8 nations and the Qing was called the Boxer Protocol. Signed September 7, 1901, the protocol demanded, among other things, destruction of a series of forts used to resist foreign troops, the legation quarter to be off-limits to Chinese people and held by foreign troops, a reparation payment of 450 million taels of silver, or about 333 million US dollars at the time. No weapons were to be bought or sold by the Qing for 2 years, with an extension as the 8 nations saw fit, and the punishment by prison, exile, or death of any person responsible for the rebellion. Let's think about this for a moment. From what you've learned this year, make a prediction about what the Chinese would think about these provisions. Yeah, they probably wouldn't be thrilled. Chinese culture dates back at least 4,000 years, with an imperial and organizational history far grander than most of the nations that they were now forced to bow to. The common people of China were still starving and fed up with foreign influence. With that in mind, let's answer our final question. What was the aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion? China's miseries at the hands of foreign powers were, unfortunately, far from over in 1901. Even though the Boxer Rebellion failed, the spark of resistance was still there, and the Chinese belief in their own people and future would continue to rise for about the next 50 years. What happens in about 50 years, you may ask? Well, Stay with us, because as you know, history is everywhere.
Hey!